Hey guys, I wanted to share with you 8 ways that going to a monastery is just like going to Burning Man. Number 1, Desert Fathers. St. Anthony the Great is often called the father of Christian monasticism. He wasn't the first monastic, but he went out into the Egyptian desert to be a hermit and to pray and try to get closer to God. And St. Athanasius wrote his biography. And that biography really popularized monasticism. Like after him, there was just more and more people that moved out to monasteries in the desert to be monastics. And then Larry Harvey is the desert father of Burning Man. Well, Larry Harvey brought his man to burn out to a party, an annual party in the desert that the Cacophony Society had been having. And they kept on doing that, and it grew more and more popular. And today, Burning Man is an annual event that takes place with 72,000 people in the Black Rock Desert of Nevada. 2, both give you the opportunity to disconnect. At least for now, the cell service at Burning Man's not so good. It gets better every year, and I don't think that's a good thing. I really enjoy the opportunity to get out of my head and into my body. Burning Man is an analog event, unlike most things we do in life, which nowadays are digital. At the monastery I went to is the same thing. Very little cell service, almost none at all, and you had no choice about being on your phone versus being in the world, because your phone just wasn't an option. And even at monasteries that do have good service, or festivals that do have good service, like, it's better to not be on your phone. It gives you the chance to be embodied, to encounter the world as it is, rather than the world of digital social noise. Number 3, decommodification, mostly. At a monastery, mostly, money isn't a thing that's used. The brothers that live there don't earn any pay. They buy food together, and they cook it together, and the monastery usually survives on donations or some sort of craft that they do sell to the outside world. But each individual brother or sister, if it's a female monastery, doesn't deal with money. Usually it's just the abbot or one of the senior brothers that deals with money. And at Burning Man, decommodification is one of the 10 principles. So it's a gift economy. That's not a barter economy. The idea is that you bring things there to give, and you let people give to you. This gives people the chance to connect with each other, take a break from the capitalist mindset that in order to get something, we must provide something in exchange for that value. It creates the feeling of everyone being a big family. Now, at both events, there's an exception. In the monastery, there's usually a bookshop or something that sells prayer ropes and writings of saints or scholars. And at Burning Man, you can buy exactly 2 things with money, coffee and ice. And, well, also, I guess there's some outside, you can coordinate with someone and pay them beforehand to supply your camp with something. But that's a little bit in the gray area on decommodification, and the org has tried to clamp down on that a little bit. Number 4, getting up at 3 a.m. for a sunrise set. At the monastery, we serve liturgy every day at 4 a.m. in a candlelit church. It felt like something straight out of the Middle Ages or out of the Apostles' time, being surrounded by all these illustrations of biblical scenes in the lives of the saints, lit entirely by candlelight. There was only one electric light in the church, and that was over the chanter stand, but it was there so that they could see the music. And by the time liturgy finished around 6 or 6:30, the sun was just starting to rise, and the sky was just starting to brighten in the desert valley there. At Burning Man, sunrise dance sets are very popular. So a lot of people will get up at 3 or 4 a.m. to go and see Robot Heart by the trash fence or by the temple. The sun rising over the desert is very striking. Burning Man is surrounded on several sides by mountains, but on one side it's flat all the way to the horizon, and that's where the sun rises in the morning. You have the entire rainbow of colors of the sunrise, from the blue, the deep blue of the night sky, the lighter blue as it inches towards the yellow, the chamomile yellow of the sunrise, surrounding by the orange of the glow of the sun, and then the red disc in the center. It's beautiful. And it can be a spiritual experience, or it can trigger spiritual experiences. Number 5, weather will put a crimp in your plans. At the monastery, it was there was mud from the melting of the winter snow that made things very hard to get around. We were constantly slipping and sliding. Our feet were sinking into the mud, and it was a challenge. And I worried about that if it rained or snowed while I was there. I worried about being able to drive out. I might have got stuck there. Burning Man has the same problem. It's remote. It's in the desert, and when it rains, the desert dust turns to this thick gray mud that gets on everything. And sometimes they have to shut down like the entrance line. I remember one year the entrance line was paused for over 24 hours because the cars would get stuck in the mud, or they would tear up the desert so badly that it would take years to recover. So they decided to shut it down. At Burning Man, there's not a lot of permanent buildings. Like, there are no permanent buildings. Actually, when the event's over, it's entirely cleared out. So the only buildings there are tents. So if you're going through a lightning storm or a dust storm, you're huddling in tents, and it is intense to be there. Number 6, when you return, the world seems crazy and loud. When I get back from a trip, like to a monastery or to Burning Man, I look at my inbox, my email inbox, it just feels like people yelling at me. Like, here's dozens of people that want my attention. It's so much. And you realize that the pace of the world that we've become accustomed to is so fast and so pressured. And just being around people in the normal world, it feels like their stress is contagious. And it's something you don't notice most of the time. You become accustomed to. Number 7, you annoy your friends with crazy stories that they can't understand. After I got back from the monastery, all I wanted to do was talk about it. But of course, my friends don't have the touch point of that experience, so it's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of hard to convey the feeling of daily liturgy and lots of silence and praying and the beauty of the desert environment and like what that does to the mind. And so you end up telling stories about the parts that are like the most fantastic. Like, I might talk about the 4 a.m. liturgies in the church lit by candlelight, and how the brothers don't speak for 40 days during Lent, but what it does to the spirit, what it does to the soul. It's really hard to communicate to people. And the same for Burning Man. Like, it's tempting to try to explain it to other people by talking about all the exciting pieces of art, the giant art cars going by, or the amazing coincidence that happened to you on Thursday night. But that doesn't really get across how Burning Man can affect your heart, just being in that alternative culture, that alternative community for 7 or 8 days. And that's really, to me, the most powerful part of Burning Man, is just seeing the world as your friend, and seeing the world as possibility, instead of seeing the world as hostility and scarcity. There's even parodies online that you can find. Maybe I'll link to one about like the guy that came back from Burning Man and how excited he is, and how much it doesn't seem to make sense. He seems like a crazy man to the rest of the world. And I've been that crazy man many times. And number 8, they'll change your life. When I was at the monastery and I was staying there, and I was surrounded by all this beauty, it just felt like being somewhere out of time. It was certainly someplace that like shouldn't exist in 2019. And then being surrounded by the monks and the abbot who had given their lives to contemplation of God, to prayer, to study of the scriptures and the writings of the saints and theologians of the church, it changed me. It started opening my heart to God. And I ended up becoming a catechumen, which is like the first step towards becoming a part of the Orthodox Church after my time there, which is a huge inflection point in my life. Like, I would not be the person I am now if I didn't spend those 11 days at the monastery a couple of weeks ago. And Burning Man, it made my life a lot more fun and playful. It encouraged me, being around this environment of creativity, to just try things myself, to not get hung up on doing it right or need to take a class to do something. And to me, I think the most astonishing thing about Burning Man is just seeing people as friends by default, like the community, the love between strangers there. And people say Burning Man is unsustainable, and it is, but I think it points us to a higher reality. Like, it's a dream of a better way that life could be. And I think that, and often it has this reputation as being antithetical to Christian life, but I think the way that people treat each other at Burning Man is very Christian and very much an extrapolation of that Christian ideal. Now, there is a lot of other things that aren't so Christian at Burning Man, but the love that people show each other, that to me is Christian love. So there you have it. 8 ways that going to a monastery is just like going to Burning Man. Peace.